how would you explain the difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology?
So I can offer two explanations. One is a technical explanation, and the other is a more metaphorical explanation. So let's start with the metaphorical. It's easier to follow. So imagine you're looking at a tree from a window in your home, and you are describing the tree. That it's leaning on one side, there's fruits here. And then you walk across your home, and then you look at the tree from another window. It looks completely different because the angle of view has changed, but it's still the same tree. So Vedic astrology is one window.
Yes.
Western astrology is another window. So we are looking at the same person at the same event, but we have a certain angle of view.
It makes me just think, in the therapy, as the way I practice it, we help people to see themselves from many different angles and recognize what is, in the end, what stays, what is fake, what is conditioning, what is, and what is the essence, what is the kernel, the center. And it's from seeing it from different windows that one can finally find one's true self, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just the image that you gave. Sorry, so that was a metaphorical explanation.
Right?
And then
the technical explanation is that the starting point is different. So if you take the zodiac, which is the group of stars around which the sun moves, the background, there's a certain point in the sky that we say is the start of the zodiac. And that is known as the first point of Aries. Aries is the group of stars, a constellation, and we say, okay, that point there is the start of the zodiac. And Vedic astrology says, no, that point is the start of the zodiac. So there's no alignment between conventional Western astrology and Vedic astrology about which is the starting point.
Because of the way of counting time, the calendar, that is different? Or
no, it's because of what we call as the wobble of the earth. So the earth is a spinning top, right? And it's wobbling on its axis. Right? So it's rotating and it's wobbling. And that wobble changes that point that we see in the sky.
And that Western astrology doesn't take it into account.
That Western astrology does not take into account.
How come then that even though they don't take that into account, sometimes they are quite accurate about their... because you would say, okay, in Western, that's a question that maybe often arises, I guess, that in Western astrology, for instance, I'm Sagittarius, and and in Vedic astrology, I'm not. So
yeah. I don't know. I don't know. So the closest I can come to giving an answer to that is interpreting a chart. It's both a science and an art. So there are tons of calculations that go into making a chart. But there's also intuition that plays a role. Intuition on what the astrologer is receiving as a guidance from some other source. So it's a combination of these two. I don't know. Yeah.
Anything else on the difference between the two?
Yeah. So the techniques are very different, right? So aspects are different. The planets are different. The way the chart looks is different. There are certain things that we have in Vedic astrology that I've not come across in Western. So, for instance, things like planetary periods, we call them as dashas. I've not seen that in Western. We have something called divisional charts, vargas, a different chart for each aspect of your life.
Mhm.
So I've not come across that in Western astrology. But also there are things in Western astrology that we don't have here. Right? So, one thing that I'd like to point out over here is I invite you to distinguish between astrology and the astrologer.
Mhm.
So astrology for me is perfect, but the astrologer has a long way to go. So whether the astrologer practices Western astrology or Vedic astrology, maybe both are perfect, but it's these astrologers, we astrologers, who don't know how to use those tools. So I always ask my clients to take a second opinion. Like what you were saying earlier of looking at different perspectives, removing everything, and then what's at the core. So take another opinion, and see what another astrologer has to say about the same chart, the same situation.
You really say that?
I really say that to my clients. It's like going to a doctor. Take another opinion. Why do you do something based on the opinion of one doctor? You don't. You take a second opinion, especially if it's a big event, big condition.
Maybe one aspect that is, as I've experienced, as very important in Indian life. The question the idea just came into my mind, but we didn't discuss it before, is how important astrology is in marriage, for instance. How usually you really consult the astrologer before getting into the whole process of marriage. Is it okay to talk about that?
Sure. We can talk about
How was it done traditionally? Maybe it has changed a little also over the past few years. I don't know. What do you observe?
How was it done traditionally? So we have something called compatibility analysis. That is what you're referring to when you match charts before marriage. And when I study the texts, what I find is the goal of marriage was to further the lineage. So I take you back to ancient India, where you have a king, and what's important is to have a prince who takes over the king, and that spills over to all aspects of ancient Indian life, right?
Or if it's a trader, it's to inherit the trade. If it's a farmer, it's to inherit the farm, and so on.
Yeah. What I think the goal should be, right, is self-knowledge. Does marriage with another being help me more progress on that path of self-knowledge? Right? Which is a very different goal from inheritance or furthering the lineage. So how you would match the charts would be very different based on what is the goal of the couple. If the goal is pleasure, it's a very different way of matching the charts.
You do that? Matching charts for...
Yeah. So what's happened over the past few years is people seem to come to an astrologer and ask, is this a good match or not? And the astrologer gives a yes or no answer. But I don't do that. It's more about saying, okay, with this person, these are the challenges you will face in these areas of life. With this other person, these are the challenges you will face.
And these are the positive aspects also.
And these are the, if you want to call it positive or negative, but it's more like what are the challenges, what is working in your favor. And I try to help you decide what is important for you. Is material prosperity important? In which case, maybe with a few charts it works better, but at the expense of something else.
So the way you are doing is maybe not the way traditional astrologer would have done it, or do you think
it is not the way most astrologers would do.
Yes. because you incorporate really that sense of self-knowledge and maybe the idea that we are in life we are in this life to
if you look at the Vedas, if you want to summarize it in one phrase, for me it would be to know yourself. Or to remember who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now you look at all the different branches of the Vedas, whether it's yoga or astrology, it's all on that same line, to know yourself, to remember who you are. So if you apply that to astrology, it is still that is the goal, to know myself, to remember who I am. Now if I'm going to match another person's chart, that should still be my goal. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Absolutely, no, because I think what I've observed is that most people in India, at least, and maybe in the West also, I don't know, they come with questions that are self-centered, but maybe in a more ego-centered way, and not in that sense of self-knowing path. So that's also one thing that I find very interesting about your approach.
So in Vedic astrology, we consider only the planets that can be seen with the naked eye. Right? So we have the Sun, Moon, Mars, we have Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. So up until Saturn is what we can see without binoculars, without a telescope. We cannot see Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. We believe that is the reason why they are not considered in Vedic astrology. So it's just these are the graphs.
So that's 7.
That's 7. But we also have 2 nodes of the moon called Rahu and Ketu. They are not physical entities in the sky. They are more like mathematical points based on how the moon is going around the earth. The tilt of the plane, of the 2 planes, moon around the earth and the earth around the sun, where they intersect determines these 2 points. So we have the 7 plus Rahu 2 and Ketu. So that takes it to 9. Right?
And that is the Navagrahas.
That is the Nava Graha. Nava meaning 9 and Graha meaning entity. But there could be...
So we were discussing earlier, and I told Vikram that one of the translation in Sanskrit can be of Graha, that which seizes you, that which takes over you and has an influence on you. Whether you want it or not, they are there.
That's right. So those are the Navagrahas. No? And so the stars are different from the planets or the Navagrahas. The stars are those that twinkle in the sky very far away, hundreds of light years away. The Navagrahas, or let's take the 7 grahas, they are very close to Earth. So the theory is that the energies of the stars are being filtered by the planets before they reach Earth, before they reach us on Earth. So that's the combination we are looking at. Which planet, Navagraha, is filtering the energies of which stars? That's the whole thing of astrology.
I see. And how would you describe or talk about these grahas? How they influence us, how they...
So the way they influence is like filters. So for instance, if there is yellow light and the filter is also yellow, it's really yellow, the light that passes through. Right? If the filter is, I don't know, a black, it darkens that yellow. Right? So you can think of this as filter. But The thing is, this is not mentioned in the Vedas. Right? The question of why is not answered in the Vedas. So it's all our hypothesis. This is what it could be. Right? So this is one theory that is floating around, that this is how astrology works, as a theory of influence. There's another theory, which is the theory of inference. We are going on a tangent here, if that's okay. Yeah, we can take it up. So the theory of inference is all about synchronicities. There's something happening here, there's something else happening here. There's no cause effect. It's just happening at the same time. So looking at how something is happening here, we can infer what's happening somewhere else. This is very different from influence.
And how would you give an example
I can
explain that?
More than an example, it's you take the modern scientific view of creation. We believe that everything originated from the Big Bang, a tiny point from which everything is spreading out. The origin is the same. The same thing, what the Vedas say, is that the origin is Brahma. Everything originates from that single point called Brahma, from which everything is exploding, expanding. Now, the planets are going in one direction. Life on Earth is going in another direction. But everything is
from the
same point. So looking at how the planets and stars are, we are inferring what's happening over here. It's like, say you have two pendulums. Both, you start rotating or revolving in the same time. Both starts at the same time. One is going clockwise, the other is going anti-clockwise. Looking at where one pendulum is, we can see where the other pendulum is. Because they both started at the same time. One is not influencing the other. Right? So it's a synchronicity. It's things are happening together. It's a very different view.
And are there sources from which these...
No. So the source I can say for synchronicity is Carl Jung. He's the one who, of course, came up with this concept.
But how does it come into
Vedic astrology? It's just that I've been trying to find answers, and this seems to make sense to me.
Okay. I understand. Okay.